everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Spouse Angle. For those of you who have listened along this season of the podcast, you know that it's time for our monthly feature episode where I talk with military spouses and family members about really themselves and their stories. There are so many incredible members of the military community out there, so it's a good time to take a break from the news that we usually cover on this podcast and just get to know some really awesome people. All right, so now I want to introduce you guys to today's guest, who I'm very excited about. Brian Alvarado is a military community advocate by day and a gadget geek and amateur kitchen genius by night. He is the director of military spouse programs on the military spouse team at Hiring Our Heroes, which is a program of the United States Chamber of Commerce Foundation. Brian currently serves on the advisory board of the Military Family Advisory Network. He is the 2018 Armed Forces Insurance Navy Spouse of the Year and has been recognized by the American Military Partner Association with their National Community Service Award, as well as the recipient of the 2016 Vanguard Equality Award from Equality California. He and his spouse, Matthew Alvarado, who's retired Navy, both reside in Washington, D.C. Brian, those are a lot of accomplishments there. So I'm excited to learn even more about you today. So thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure, and it's always weird to hear that coming back at you, right? It was a little walk down memory lane for me, so that was fun.
Oh, good. All right, so your husband recently retired, I believe. So how long were you an active duty spouse? Tell me a little bit about your military spouse journey, if you will. I know that word is used a lot.
Yeah, so I became a military spouse the year that marriage equality became the law of the land, 2015. Before that, I was, I really lived the life like a lot of same-sex military partners did at the time. We were really not a part of the military conversation. We were not a part of the bigger military family from a legal perspective. And when marriage equality happened and my husband and I were able to get married legally, it was really important to both of us that we understand that that marriage is a privilege, and with privileges come responsibilities. And for me, becoming a military spouse came with the responsibility of engaging and giving back. And while my husband did serve for many years under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and even after Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, we were still fighting for marriage equality. Service to my husband was incredibly important. It was the most important thing to him. His grandfather was a D-Day service member who stormed the beaches in Normandy. And I'll tell you a quick side story. On our honeymoon, we went to France, and we drove over to Normandy, and we got to walk along the beach that his grandfather stormed during that important campaign in World War II. But it was always important to my husband to serve and to do it with integrity. And when marriage equality happened, we had one conversation over a dinner and a beer, and I said, I want to join the FRG, and I want to give back. I want to help out. I don't care if it's selling pies or manning the bouncy house at the family day. Like let me do something. And that just spiraled into what my life has become now. In the best of ways, the military community has been an absolute delightful and an important part of my growth as a human being. And it's been a welcoming community, and one that I am absolutely honored to be a part of every day.
What has the transition to retired life been like for you guys?
Well, it hasn't been that different because my spouse retired from the U.S. Navy and then went right back to work for the U.S. Navy.
Okay.
So the only thing that's really different is we don't have uniforms or deployments anymore, which is a big deal, right? Like that's a big part of the military life. But he still comes home and we still have Navy talk.
That's great. Tell me about the work that you do with Hiring Our Heroes. I know it's something you're really passionate about. So tell me about your day job.
Yeah, so when my spouse retired in 2019, right at the same exact time, I was given the opportunity to become a staff member with Hiring Our Heroes, which stems from back in 2015 when I first heard of Hiring Our Heroes. And it was after joining an FRG and then becoming the president of an FRG and then eventually a US Navy ombudsman. I was working locally with spouses in San Diego who were having a hard time finding jobs. San Diego is a huge metropolis. It's very expensive to live there, and the majority of the military bases are smack dab right in the middle of downtown, where nobody in the military can afford to live. It's just, it's impossible. Um, and so I was, just because of the nature of my career in business and my network in San Diego, I put that to work, and I was able to help open some doors for some young military spouses to get their foot in the door in business. And that spiraled into me learning about Hiring Our Heroes and their Military Spouse Professional Network program, which is a network of 63 networks around the globe, in and around defense communities, that work to provide peer to peer networking, employer engagement, and professional development for military spouses. And so I started volunteering with that organization and volunteered with them from 2015 to 2019 until I was offered a position to join the staff, and move to Washington, D.C. to be here. And now I'm the director of the Military Spouse Program, where I get to have the privilege of leading a team of dedicated professionals who work every day in support of building economic stability through employment opportunities for the military community.
That's great. We love hiring our heroes on this show. Our listeners probably recognize that. I know we've done a few episodes focused. We had your president on the show last season, our very first episode, Eric Eversole. So that's a lot of fun. I know I've leaned on them for research and a lot of resources over the years as a journalist. So that's great that you love it there. Well, you've done lots of cool things. Like I said, you have a lot of accomplishments and recognitions that we've talked about. But oh, by the way, you were on the Ellen Show. So I want to hear all about that experience. How did that come about?
Yeah, I do love to tell this story because when somebody says, what's the cool thing that ever happened to you, or tell us something unique about you, I get to have this story, right?
Yeah,
Um,
it's a good
and
one.
I was nominated for the Military Spouse of the Year program through Armed Forces Insurance in 2016 by the spouse of the commanding officer of my service member's command. And I became the spouse of the year for Naval Base Coronado. That was like the coolest thing you could think of, right? I didn't even know that program existed. But then I was nominated again in 2018 for Naval Base Point Loma, and I eventually was named the 2018 overall U.S. Navy Spouse of the Year through that program. And I was the first same-sex military spouse to ever be elevated to that level within that program. And that quickly, like, just sort of spread across the news. I mean, we were getting contacted by organizations in England and Australia, like, wanting to know what that meant. And the same time I found out that I was being named that Navy Spouse of the Year, I was also told that I was going to be contacted by a producer from the Ellen DeGeneres Show. And so I fell over a little bit onto my couch and had to catch my breath a minute. And we had a couple, interviews with the producers, and then we're invited to come and tell our story to Ellen and to her viewers. And the thing that is, I think, the most interesting takeaway from that experience was, no matter how much I ever think I have my nerves under control, I don't. I just don't. I was cool, calm, and collected right until we walked right out, and then I lost all the preparing I did, all of the things I wanted to say. None of it came out right. And But she was very genuine in her care for the military community, as we all know. Anybody who's ever watched the show, she enjoys having military families on, and loves to hear from military spouses and service members about their journeys, and does what she can to help out. And she was just very genuine and gave a donation to Hiring Our Heroes. So that can never be a bad day for us.
Yeah, that was really awesome. Well, one thing you guys talked about on the show, I watched a little clip from it, was how that your husband had served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which is something, we kind of already brought up. And in 10 years, we've gone from that policy to now the Pentagon is openly acknowledging and celebrating the contributions of LGBTQ service members and acknowledging June as Pride Month. And the Army actually recently released a recruiting ad that featured the story of a soldier who was raised by lesbian moms. And that was all sorts of controversial. We're not going to get into that today. But what has that transition been like for your spouse that now the military is accepting of him in your relationship? And how has that shaped his service? Again, you kind of already touched on this, but what has it been like for you as a spouse watching him and yourself go through this?
Well, I'll just be quite honest with you. It has been an emotional journey. It's been a journey of self worth exploration. What does serving in the military for my spouse mean after 20 years? Right? Did he waste 20 years of his life? With an organization that doesn't accept him for what he brought to the table? And the answer is no. He didn't waste his time. The United States military is an incredible organization that has been embracing change at a pace far greater than our civilian counterparts, to be quite honest. And it's been a transition that I believe we are very blessed to be witnessing in our lifetime. Um, when we live in a country that's as divided in some areas as we are, knowing that when the commander in chief or the secretary of defense or your company commander says you're going to abide by these equality initiatives, they do for the most part. And I think that's a really important aspect of what this has looked like. Has it all been wonderful? No. There are stories of struggle and there are stories of strife. We are very blessed that my husband never experienced that. I never experienced it as a spouse. I've always, like I said, been welcomed with open arms. Um, on every military base I go to, which are a lot in the work that I do, on across all the services. But from our perspective, and that's the only thing I can speak to. It's I'm really proud of the Department of Defense and how far it's come and the people that are making and implementing these equality initiatives.
Well, how was it fitting in for you with the military spouse groups? And I don't necessarily mean as a gay man, but just as a man, because we had a male military spouse come on last year. Actually, you probably know him, David Carrera from the. He
Mhm.
was another Navy Spouse of the Year. I
Mhm.
think last year, and he talked about how a lot of the literature and activities were geared toward women because women obviously make up the majority of the male spouse population. So tell me
Mhm.
what that was like. Did you have any trouble fitting in? Did you kind of find a way in to get accepted, be included, I
Yeah,
guess?
absolutely. And I've never met David, but I understand his perspective, and I have lived it. And but I came at it from a very different perspective. Like I really did come at it from a respectful place, knowing that the military spouse community is 93% female, and that community utilizes the fact that they are so predominantly female as a safe space for themselves, right? They band together when their husbands are deployed, and it's their safe space. There's no outside threats. They trust each other, and they have that connection, and I respect that wholeheartedly. And so when I came into being a military spouse and wanted to be involved in the community, I just dipped my toe in and said, if you need anything, I'm here for you in whatever capacity I can be for you in my local like command unit, right? And it ended up being what could I bring to the table? And what I could bring was the employment perspective and the network and helping in that aspect. I sold a pie or two every now and then, but I didn't go to the spa nights, right? I didn't do that part of it, um, because that's their safe space, and I want them to have that. But knowing that I was coming into their community, I wanted to do it in the most respectful way that I could. And I think that really does make a difference in that acceptance. So then I was getting invitations to the spa nights, and I was, being invited to participate in more and more things and build a bigger community of my own within the military spouse population.
Brian, now that you have this platform of having been Navy Spouse of the Year, you were on Ellen, people have seen your story out there. Have you gotten contacted by anybody who has either been discriminated against or maybe someone who is entering into a same sex relationship with someone in the military and just wants advice? Have you been able to use your platform in that way at all?
Absolutely, and we do it in a very private manner. It's not like a public thing for us. We do. Matthew and I both get reached out to on a weekly basis. People just looking for advice, people looking for, sometimes just someone to have solidarity with, and a conversation with. Um, you know, looking for resources. Sometimes it's just somebody to talk to, and we do, and we do serve our community in that aspect, but we do keep that very private.
Right. That's fair. Well, someone asked me yesterday how the work that I do on this podcast helps to bridge the military civilian divide. And honestly, I think storytelling is just a really great way to do that. So that was kind of my answer. But while that question is fresh on my mind, I wanted to just kind of ask you today, what is something that you wish the general public, the civilian public, knew about military spouses in the military community?
That's a great question, and thank you for asking that because I have an answer. And that answer
Good.
is, what I want our population, our civilian peers to know and to understand is that we have a lot to offer these communities that we move into. We bring a wealth of knowledge. We bring diversity of thought. We bring a skill set that is unique to our community. Um, you know, and I'll just give you one simple example. If you have ever managed a PCS without yelling at somebody, that is a skill set, right? And that sort of problem solving aspect, and all of the skills that come along with the development of ourselves in this community has value, and we want to bring that value to the communities that we live in, albeit for 18 months to 3 years or however long, but we want to be a value to the community that we're living in. And so if that there was one thing that I could shout from the rooftops, it's that we have a lot to offer, and we're ready, to serve the communities that we live in.
Is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with before we wrap up today?
I just always want to end, when I have these wonderful conversations with amazing people like you, to just remind our community, to never undersell yourself, and to remember that we can absolutely support our service member spouses' careers and have a fulfilling one of our own.
Yeah, that's great. And if you want to learn more about that, how can they contact you, Brian?
They can reach out to any of us throughout the Military Spouse Professional Network on Facebook and LinkedIn. Or if you would like, you can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, and just do a search by my name and I pop right up.
Great. Well, thank you, Brian, so much. I loved learning more about your story and having the chance to get to know you today. You've been someone that's been on my radar for a long time, so I'm glad you finally were able to come on the show.
Oh, it's been a pleasure to get to know you, Natalie, and I'm thrilled to have been here.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.